My name is Lynn Crawford, and I work the night shift in hospice. That is the shift nobody wants. 11 at night until 7 in the morning, when the bodies fail most often, when the families are sleeping in terrible chairs in the waiting room, when everything happens in a kind of dream state that belongs only to the deep hours. I have worked this shift for 13 years. I know it better than I know the daytime world. I know the rhythms of dying better than I know the rhythms of living. I know which patients will die when it rains, and which ones hang on until morning, clinging to the body a few more hours. I have developed an intuition about the patterns of dying that I cannot explain to anyone who has not spent years in the same dark, in the same fluorescent light, hearing the same machines humming through the night hours. I can feel when something is waiting outside the room, ready to collect the person who is ready to leave. I know the sounds of a body shutting down, the particular rattle of lung fluid, the change in breathing patterns that precedes the final hours. I know the moment when someone stops fighting and simply lets go, when the resistance drains out of the body like water from a vessel that is finally cracked. The ones who talk about seeing their dead relatives usually go within 24 hours. I have learned to listen to what they are seeing, to trust what they are telling me, even when it cannot be measured or documented in the medical charts. The ones who lie silent and still can last for weeks, holding on through some kind of stubbornness or unfinished business, through a conversation that was never had or a forgiveness that was never granted. I have learned to read the small signs that no one else notices. I can feel the quality of the room changing, the way the air shifts, the way the light seems different even though nothing has changed. I can feel the moment when someone is beginning to cross over, that particular thinning of the separation between this world and whatever comes next. Last winter, I was driving home from my shift at 3 in the morning. Empty streets. The particular silence that belongs only to night shift workers and insomniacs and people moving through the world at hours when most of it is asleep. The radio was playing something I had not been paying attention to. A delivery truck ran a red light. No warning, just a sound like the world cracking open, and then I was not in my car anymore. I was spinning. Everything was spinning and the world was upside down. I could feel my right leg being held by something that was not supposed to be holding it. I could feel the warm, spreading sensation across my chest that 13 years of hospice work had taught me to recognize as internal bleeding. I was conscious through most of it. That is the part I do not talk about much. People want the dying part to be quick. Mine was not. I was stuck in the wreckage, and I was bleeding, and I was performing the dying assessment I had performed 100 times for patients, except now I was both the assessor and the person being assessed. There is a dark comedy in that, which I did not fully appreciate until later. I was aware of my own decline the way I was aware of the smell of gasoline and the sound of emergency sirens beginning in the distance. I was aware of my mind still doing the work it had been trained to do, cataloging the symptoms, documenting the failure of the body, even as my body was the one failing. And then I was not in the wreckage anymore. I was in a field. Not a field like anything on this earth, a field that went on forever in every direction, with grass that was every shade of green that has ever existed, and also colors that green has never been. Colors that seemed to hold light inside them. The sky was not blue or black or gray. It was alive. It was moving. It had depth and color and the quality of consciousness itself. And I understood that the sky was not separate from the field. Everything was part of the same organism, the same consciousness, and I was part of it too. I understood this not as words, but as knowing that arrived fully formed, without explanation or process. I was part of the field the way a wave is part of the ocean. The thing that strikes me most, when I try to describe this, is the quality of belonging. I have never belonged anywhere the way I belonged in that field. I had spent 13 years on the night shift, in part because night shift workers are their own tribe. We belong to the dark hours in a way that day shift people do not understand. But that belonging was nothing compared to this. This was not belonging to a place or a group of people. This was belonging to existence itself. The recognition that I was not something that had entered the universe from outside. I was something the universe had made from its own material. I had always been part of it. The field was not a destination. It was a homecoming to something I had never actually left. And the homecoming was so complete and so immediate that I understood in the moment I arrived that I had been away for only a brief time, and that what humans call a life is the brief time away from this place. I could see the dying people, every person I had held at the moment of death, every patient I had sat with during those long night shift hours, every hand I had held in the darkness, every goodbye I had witnessed. They were here, all around me, and they were fully themselves, and they were also part of this vast thing I was part of. They were not separate from me. We were not separate from each other. They were settled in a way I had not understood was possible. Not the peace of numbness or the peace of being unaware. The peace of someone who has finally understood the answer to a question that had been troubling them for a very long time. The question they had all been asking was answered here. The peace was the answer itself. And I understood something in that moment that changed everything I would do for the rest of my life. The people I had been afraid for, the ones I had held in the darkness, the ones I had worried about as they crossed this threshold, they were not afraid anymore. They were home. I thought about a patient named Marcus, a man in his 80s with stage 4 lung cancer, who had begged me every night for 3 weeks to promise him he did not have to be afraid. Every night I had told him the truth as best I knew it, but the truth was limited by my own uncertainty. I did not know. I was guessing based on what I had read and what I wanted to believe. I was doing my job, providing comfort, but from behind the same wall of professional distance that had defined my work for 13 years. Now I knew the real truth, the truth that would have dissolved his fear in a moment. And I wanted to come back and look him in the eye and tell him. I wanted to sit next to him and say, I know where you are going, and I promise you it is real. I promise you that everyone you have loved is already there, waiting. I promise you that the field is real and it is home. So I came back. I came back into the wreckage and the pain. I came back into a body that was broken and did not work properly anymore. The paramedics said I had been dead for 5 minutes. They could not explain why I was still conscious when they pulled me out. They said it was not possible, but there I was, aware and present and knowing things about where I had just been. I spent 2 months in the hospital. I have permanent nerve damage in my right leg. I walk with a cane now. I am not young enough to bounce back from something like this. I am not the person I was before this happened. But I went back to work. Not the night shift anymore. I could not manage that with my leg. But I came back, and I found Marcus in the hospice ward, and I sat beside his bed, and I told him about the field. I told him that every person he had ever loved was there. I told him that what was waiting for him was not darkness, but something more familiar than anything he had ever felt, something like home. I watched his face change. I watched the fear drain out of it. He died the next morning, and he was peaceful. He was ready. I cannot walk very far now. My leg hurts every day. Some days I wonder if I made the right choice, staying. But then I sit with someone who is afraid of what is coming, and I know. I came back because this world still needs people who have seen the field. People who can carry that knowing back and offer it to the ones who are approaching the crossing. I came back because the people who are still here need witnesses who know. The field is real. It is not a comfort story. It is not a hallucination. It is where we all come from and where we all return. The grass is every shade of green that has ever existed. The belonging is total, and everyone you have ever loved is already there, settled and at peace, waiting at the edge of the field for the brief time you are away. I spent years wishing I had this knowledge sooner, before I spent 13 years telling myself that the impossible things I witnessed in those final hours were just neurology. I put together a short guide about what the dying actually see, the visions and the recognitions that happen in those last hours that no one explains to families, and that would change everything if they did. The link is right below this video, because the field is real, and what your loved one is seeing in those final hours is not confusion. It is arrival.